PNC, America's Black News Channel. Watch us on all major cable providers and major streaming platforms. Finally, news that speaks to us.
Fatima Gross Graves, the president and CEO of the National Women's Law Center, joins me now to discuss the importance and the impact of Judge Brown Jackson's presence and what all she could do on the Supreme Court. Fatima, welcome to Amplified. Thank you for joining me tonight. Now, Judge Brown Jackson is replacing Justice Stephen Breyer, who leans left. So, not really going to affect the conservative majority on the Supreme Court. But I would love for you to start off by, just cheerleading here and giving us a sense of, even if the makeup of the court isn't shifting, why her on this court will actually matter.
Well, we should start where you started, which is really just how qualified she is. She's really kind of overqualified. She's clerked at all levels. She's had a wide range of legal experience, from private practice to being on the U.S. Sentencing Commission, to being a federal public defender, to being a district court judge and a court of appeals judge. And she's written almost 600 opinions and has been a judge for almost 10 years. So you have this very, very experienced person who is highly credentialed, and she will make history. She'll make history as the first Black woman in that seat. And it's actually highlighting for all of us how it is that we've gone this long without having the life experience or perspective of a Black woman on the Supreme Court at all. So that's what has me so excited. We get to see this woman in all her excellence and know that she will make history.
Absolutely making history, and this representation so matters. There are currently no Black women in the U.S. Senate, meaning that none of the 22 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee that are holding the hearings this week actually look like Judge Jackson. So what is the significance of that lack of representation, especially for this confirmation process?
It is highlighting that exact fact. When Senator Harris was on the Judiciary Committee and in the U.S. Senate, it was a reminder that her perspective mattered. When she was in the Senate, she championed bills that hadn't really been championed in the same way before, right? She did a series of bills on the maternal mortality crisis. She did a bill on fibroids, which is something that disproportionately affects Black women. Now, I'm not saying that, she's bringing and championing those things in the White House now, but it's a huge gap that we don't have her or anyone like her on the Judiciary Committee. And so it is highlighting how unrepresentative a lot of our bodies and institutions are.
The idea that, people's lived experience absolutely shapes the way that they prioritize issues, not just simply see them, because of course we all see the issues the way that we see them based on, how we interpret the law and certainly how we've been impacted by it. But the fact that these conversations may not happen if there's not a woman in the room or there's not a Black person in the room, and certainly having a Black woman brings that all together, and to have someone who's been a first in all of her roles in institutions also is meaningful as well. I want to come back to those issues and get kind of into the substance of that. But I want to talk about this experience piece. You led with it, where you're like, she's qualified. She's most qualified. Of course she's qualified. I find that, you run the National Women's Law Center, and I know you get this gender inequity. I find that women often have to defend their qualifications, even when they are more prepared and more qualified for the job than the dudes are. All the time this happens. This also happens with Black folks, too. Judge Jackson has already been approved by the Senate 3 times over the course of her career, twice for federal court appointments and once for the U.S. Sentencing Commission. So I think that all of these senators have already determined that she is qualified. So how do you think that this now reassessing of her capabilities and qualifications is going to play out in these hearings?
I wish I didn't have to emphasize it over and over again, but I feel like I need to. You are right. This is the 4th time she has appeared before the same committee, before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Just last summer, they confirmed her for the Court of Appeals. Clearly, they thought she was qualified then. But the reason I have felt like I've had to start there and remind people of the depth and breadth of her experience is because I also expect, and we already saw some signaling of it today in the hearing, I expect that we're going to basically see distorting of her record and efforts to paint her as someone who she actually is not. So we have to be out there reminding people of who she is.
Yeah, that's already happening. We've already seen one senator go off on a crazy tangent trying to paint her time on the Sentencing Commission as now being sympathetic to pedophiles and all this other crazy stuff that he's saying, that thankfully the Washington Post then went back and fact checked and said, no, that's misconstruing her record, but not before the RNC ran with it and started fundraising off of the disinformation and misinformation, about her. I wonder, if appointed, Judge Jackson is going to be the first Supreme Court justice to actually have experience as a public defender. Also a big deal. So talk about, a little bit about the significance of a Supreme Court justice actually having that angle of a legal background.
It's extremely important, and it's actually been since Justice Marshall was on the court 30 years ago that we even had anyone who'd had experience representing criminal defendants. So the fact that the Supreme Court has missed that experience is a huge gap, given how many important cases that it considers involving people who have contact with the criminal justice system. If our Constitution and our justice system is to mean anything, it must be that equal access to the law and fair treatment under the law is available for everyone, not just for the very, very wealthy, but especially for those who have few resources. And she will have that very specific perspective to bring into the conversations in the court. It's not there in the same way now.
No, it's not at all. Back in February, 14 black congresswomen wrote a letter to President Biden urging him to nominate someone who had a track record of defending the rights of America's marginalized communities. And I love the way that's framed, because we end up, talking a lot about having a black woman and why that's meaningful. But we already got a black guy up there who is not meaningful at all, because just because you're black doesn't mean that you're actually playing for our team. I wonder how you think that Judge Jackson actually measures up to that request that was made in terms of defending marginalized communities.
Well, we did a review of her record, and we feel very confident that she is someone who understands those issues and will bring that important perspective in the way that she considers the law. And I have to say, it's all the more important that someone like Judge Jackson be there, given that Justice Thomas is on the court. Right now, he is somehow able to sort of own the mantle of blackness by himself on the Supreme Court. And he's used that in decisions over time, including in abortion, where he has written dissents where he has sort of evoked a totally terrible misunderstanding of blackness to justify harmful decisions. So I actually think having another voice in there feels critical right now.
So I wanna run a clip for you while I have you. Senator Ted Cruz of Texas made some strong comments about the civility that he, of all people, hoped that Judge Jackson would experience throughout her confirmation in comparison to Justice Kavanaugh's hearings. Let's take a look at this.
Judge Jackson, I can assure you that your hearing will feature none of that disgraceful behavior. No one is going to inquire into your teenage dating habits. No one is going to ask you with mock severity, do you like beer? But that's not to say this hearing should be non-substantive and non-vigorous.
I don't even have the time to get into, the fact that he just discredited the questioning of Kavanaugh as not being substantive when it was about sexual assault. But nonetheless, what are your thoughts on his comment?
2018 was not that long ago, so many of us were around to see it, experience it, including in firsthand. I was in the hearing room for those hearings, and I will just say what we were talking about at the time very serious allegations of sexual violence that were mistreated by that committee. And so part of what they're trying to do right now is rewrite that history, rewrite what happened with Justice Kavanaugh's nomination, rewrite what happened with Justice Barrett's nomination, that it happened in 30 days while millions of people had already voted. And part of what they're trying to do is make it seem as if that was typical. Those nominations were not typical, and is part of the reason why people have had less and less trust in the Supreme Court. I actually think the Judiciary Committee has an important role to look at what's happened with the Supreme Court, but the sort of approach Ted Cruz was taken made no sense.
Thank you so much for reminding us that that was not normal. And certainly, you know, Ted Cruz is his own hypocrite. Nonetheless, Fatima Gross Graves, President and CEO of the National Women's Law Center, thank you so much for joining me tonight on Amplified. I'm excited to have you back so we can continue to follow all of this together. Appreciate your time.